So in this video, I'm going to walk through how to build a voice agent in Retell AI. The reason we're using Retell is that generally, if you're trying to build voice agents in a no-code visual way, this is likely going to be your best option and probably the most affordable. If you want to confirm that, you can go to voiceai.guide. This is something I built. Pop in what you're trying to build, how many calls, etc., and it's going to tell you what your likely cost is. The TLDR though is that if you're looking for something no-code, Retell AI is going to be your best option. If you're a developer and you don't mind about it not being no-code, Vapi is probably going to be a little bit cheaper. But generally speaking, Retell is one of just a handful of options that are pretty decent. So if you haven't already, from the Retell website, you can click up here and create an account. You're going to have to pop in your phone number and verify your number. You're going to get $10 free credits, and that's going to take you to a dashboard like this. Now, to just quickly explain what we've got going on down the left, you've got your agents. We're going to build one of these in a moment. We've got our knowledge base. You can upload information about your company that your agents can reference. This is super easy. You can just drop documents in here. It can also scrape your website, or you can just copy and paste in text. You've got your phone numbers here, so you can buy a phone number. It's $2 a month if you do it directly on Retell, or you can connect to something like Twilio and bring your numbers over from there. Batch calling, I'm not going to touch on that now. And then we've got call history, chat history, and analytics where you can see all the calls that have been made, how much each one has cost, etc. So we're going to go into agents and create a new voice agent. Now you can see here we've got 4 options. We can create a conversational flow agent, which is what we're going to do today. Single prompt agents, these are really good if you're just trying to build something really simple like screening or doing triage. You've got multi-prompt agents and then custom LLM. I tend not to use these bottom two, so I'm not going to go into too much detail there. But today we're going to go for a conversational flow agent. Now, the first thing you'll see is you've got a bunch of templates here, and these are really, really good. So if your use case that you're trying to build is similar to one of these, I would highly recommend starting with one of these. But for the purpose of this video, we're going to start from blank. So I'm going to create that, and we'll just talk through some of the options that we see down the left first. These are our different nodes, and then we'll go over to the global settings and testing in a moment. So the first thing you can see is that it's created a couple of nodes for us. So we've got this welcome node here, and if we double click into that, you can see it's set up to just say a static sentence. So all that means is that every time this call starts, it's going to say exactly this text. Now, if you want this to be a little bit more dynamic, you can prompt it instead. So generally speaking with conversation nodes, it's going to be prompt based rather than static, unless you specifically need it to always say the same thing. So an example of that would be if it's in a regulated industry and you need it to say this call is being recorded, you could have that as a static sentence. You know that it's being said every time. But generally speaking, to make calls sound a bit more natural, you're going to write prompts. So we'll do that in a moment. We've also got the end call node, which is exactly as it sounds. So over here on the left, you can see we've got a couple of different nodes to choose from. So we've already covered the conversation node. We've also got function nodes. So functions allow your agents to call different tools. So you can see if we click here, we can check calendar availability, or we could do a custom function. Custom functions are going to allow you to connect your agent to other tools through things like make.com or NAN, for example. So next we've got the call transfer node. This is pretty much as it says on the tin. This allows you to escalate calls to a human. And there's a few options here. Either you can set it to be a cold transfer. This is just where the call gets directly transferred to the number that you set here. Or you can have it set up as a warm transfer where the AI provides a debrief to the next agent, providing any context that the caller has previously given. So next we've got the press digit node. This is essentially like an IVR system. It's a little bit old hat, but it allows you in situations where you need to kind of have pretty rigid logic to say, if the user presses 1, go down this route. If they press 2, go down that route. Generally speaking, if you can do that via the AI reasoning, it's going to be a better user experience, but there are situations where we still need to fall back on this more traditional IVR approach. So next you've got your logic split node. This is pretty much, again, as it says on the tin, allows you to have if statements within your workflow and say, if this is true, go up here, else go down that route. And this is probably a good point to touch on the prompt versus equation approach for transitions. So a prompt allows you to just say, like, if the user is frustrated, go down this route, else go down this route. Whereas the equation approach is better if you've got a variable that can be confirmed. So if, for example, you want to say if the caller has provided their email, go down this route, add their information to the CRM. If they haven't, go down another route instead. So next we've got the agent transfer. Very similar to the transfer call, but this allows you to seamlessly transfer between different agents in your account. This is a relatively new node, and what's nice about this is it allows you to keep your workflows quite small and modular and have multiple agents in your account that are called between each other. You don't need to have this kind of like massive chaotic workflow all in one place. So you could, for example, have an AI receptionist at a golf club. You could say if someone asks about membership, you could route the call specifically to an agent that is set up to handle membership inquiries. And the benefit of doing that, other than just keeping this kind of clean and sane, is that it keeps everything a bit more efficient, because instead of giving one agent 20 documents as its knowledge, you could give that membership agent only the knowledge that it needs to handle membership inquiries. Whereas you could have booking inquiries just handled by a booking agent. So it keeps everything a bit more efficient. That's going to keep your latency down, keep your costs down, make everything just work a little bit better. So you can see here, we've got a few options. You can select the agent that you want it to transfer to. You can also set it to say something during the transfer. You could say like, hold on one moment while I transfer you. So next we've got the SMS node for sending SMS. Good for things like confirmations, etc. So related to that, we've got the extract variable. So if there are certain bits of information that you want to collect, for example, if you are wanting to add a caller to a CRM system and you need their name, email address, and phone number, you could say during a conversation that you want to extract certain variables. And here, for example, we've got name. So you can add that in here, and that allows you to then use those variables throughout the rest of the workflow. So here, for example, if we capture the user's name as a variable, that now means in future nodes, for example, SMS, we could then say, hey, name, your booking is complete. And that's going to pipe that information in from here over to here. So next we've got the MCP node. This allows you to connect your voice agent to any MCP server. So it could be NAN, Zapier, for example. And this just opens up the range of tools that you can give your agents access to. And then finally, we've got a node for ending the call. So if at any point during your workflow you want the agent to hang up, you can connect it to this node. So let's move over to global settings, and then I'll walk through an example of a voice agent that I've actually built. So over here on the right, you can see we've got the agent's global settings. So this is where we can set things like the AI model and the voice. So here we can see we've got CMO from 11 Labs. Now, generally speaking, 99% of the cases, 11 Labs is going to be the best option to use. You do also have options like Cartesia, Minimax, and OpenAI voices, but 9 times out of 10, as I say, you're going to use 11 Labs. The benefit of 11 Labs as well is you can also clone your own voice. So you can go in here, you can upload a file of you speaking, and then Retell AI is going to pipe that over to 11 Labs and bring it back, and then you can have calls that sound like you. Now, execution mode depends on how rigidly you want this workflow to be followed. Flex mode, generally speaking, is going to be a little bit more forgiving. So how I personally like to work is starting off in rigid mode so I can spot a few issues or edge cases that my voice agent runs into. And then once I'm in production, if I'm noticing quite a lot of edge cases, then I'll push it over to flex mode. Okay, so global prompt and AI model. Now, there's no right or wrong answers here. Every model is a compromise between cost, latency, and quality. So it depends on your use case, but generally how I like to think about this is start with GPT 4.1. This is currently the kind of Goldilocks model. It's a good balance between those three competing variables. Now, if I'm getting latency issues or racking up crazy costs, I might move over to GPT 4.1 mini. Generally speaking, I don't use GPT 5. Find the latency is not fantastic at the moment. And the only time I found myself using the Anthropic models is if I need it to be a bit more conversational and a bit more natural. That is the only benefit that I found of using Claude over GPT. And Gemini, I just tend not to use for voice agents. Now, this is where you can pop in your system prompt for your agent. I tend to use the calls framework where we set the context, the authority that the agent has, the listening user experience, limits that it can't do, and then what success looks like. I'll link to this in the description below if you want to copy this and use it as a template. You can pop that in here and hit save. Next, we've got knowledge. This is a good place to add things like your pricing or product information. So if we were building a receptionist for a golf club, we could connect it to a PDF containing all the golf club's pricing and general information, opening times, etc. That then allows the agent to go and reference that document if a question is asked about it. So speech settings, this basically allows you to set whether you want it to sound like they're in a coffee shop. All of these options I would recommend leaving as they are for the time being, and then only changing them if you start to notice strange behavior when you go into testing. But generally speaking, these are all set at relatively sensible defaults. Similar situation with real-time transcription and the call settings. These are only really relevant if you're noticing issues. The only thing that I would just point out down here is the security and fallback settings. So depending on if you're in a regulated industry or you want to avoid collecting certain information for HIPAA or GDPR reasons, etc., this is where you can redact information or say only store certain bits of information, for example, to ignore personal information. So that's pretty much what we've got on the global settings. So lastly, before I show you an agent that I've built, I'll just show you how to test your agent. So next to global settings, you can see there's an option for test agent. And if you hit test, that's going to start a real-time conversation with your agent. And that's helpful for making sure that it's going through the flow in the way you'd expect, but also for testing things like latency. And you can see up here, Retell shows you an overview of what your cost per minute is, the expected latency, and how many tokens this is likely to use per run. So let's jump out of that and look at a live example.
Oakwood Park Golf Club, how can I help?
Hi, I'm looking to book a tea time.
Great. Could you tell me the date and time you'd like to book your tea time?
Ideally Friday around 1 p.m.
Just to check I've got this right, you'd like a tea time this Friday at 1 p.m. Is that correct?
Yep.
Let me check if we have a 1 p.m. slot available for you this Friday. It looks like 1 p.m. is fully booked this Friday, but we do have slots available earlier in the day from 9 a.m. up to 1 p.m. Would you like to pick a time between 9 and 1?
Let's do 10 a.m.
Perfect, 10 a.m. this Friday. Could I get your name, please?
Yeah, it's Marcus.
Thanks, Marcus. Will you be playing 9 or 18 holes?
How
many players should I book for?
9 holes, and there'll be 2 people.
Great, thanks. Lastly, could I have a phone number to reach you for the booking?
Yeah, it's this one, so it's 01234567889.
You're all set for 10 a.m. this Friday for 9 holes. Would you like to add buggy hire or need help with anything else?
No, all good, thank you. So there we had a simple example of a golf club booking agent. I'll now walk through the flow and how this has been set up. So starting with the global settings, we're in flex mode. This just gives the agent a bit of autonomy to jump between nodes. Good for catching edge cases that I've not thought about. For the global prompt, I've kept this fairly simple, just giving it a bit of guidance around speaking style, tone, that kind of thing. I'm not giving it step-by-step instructions because particularly if you're building in the conversational flow editor in Retell, you can break your prompt up at a node level. So you can see here in the individual nodes, I'm giving it more detailed instruction here. The benefit of this is that you're not sending a gigantic prompt along with every single step. So it's going to reduce your latency, make everything a bit more efficient. So first thing we're doing is we've got this welcome node, which is saying, how can I help? And you can see we've got 5 options, 5 transitions. The one that we really care about in this particular flow is if the caller wants to make or change a tea time booking. For anything else, we're transferring to a different agent or to a human. And we've got those set up in separate subflows, basically. If I were rebuilding this from scratch now, I would probably use components. This is a new feature in Retell where you can essentially create subflows. When I first built this, that wasn't a feature. So I've created different agents for each of these, which again allows me to break up the knowledge, break up the prompts into smaller, more modular agents that are better suited for handling each of those questions. There's nothing wrong with doing it all in one workflow. I just find it a bit cleaner and more efficient to break it up like this. But this particular workflow is concerned with making or changing tea time bookings. So if the caller wants to make a booking for a tea time or change a booking, they get sent down this route. And you can see here in this prompt, we've given it quite detailed instructions on what to do to make a tea time. So we're asking for a preferred date and time for the booking. Then it should run the check calendar availability function, which is this one here. That's going to go to cal.com and check if that time is available. If it's not available, it's going to suggest a few alternative times. Once a suitable time is confirmed, it's going to get their full name, whether they want to do 9 or 18 holes, number of players, and the phone number to reach them for the booking. I've also given it quite a few instructions on how to format this information, just so that when it sends it over to cal.com to make the booking, Everything is structured and formatted in the way that cow.com expects. And you can see, I think I've actually given it a JSON example of how to do that. Now, one thing to note here is I'm specifically asking it not to ask for an email address, just because that tends to go terribly wrong. If one letter is incorrect or it's not formatted properly, just doesn't work particularly well. So I'm asking for the phone number rather than the email address to make the booking. Another thing that we're doing is checking the current time before booking a tea time, just to make sure that the agent has awareness of what today's date is and we only book times in the future. That's important. For example, if you say, I want to make a booking on Friday, it's important to know what today's date and time is so that it can translate that into an absolute date. So that's what this node is doing. And then, as I mentioned, it's got access to two different functions. So we've got two transitions down here: check availability, which runs this function, and book a tea time, which runs this function. These are really straightforward. These are just using the default functions that Retell offer for cow.com. So if you were to add a function, you can see that Retell offer check calendar availability and book on the calendar here. Now, cow.com integrates with Google Calendar natively, so this is indirectly a way of getting onto Google Calendar as well. I think you can see here that booking was just made on my Google Calendar as well. And then once a booking is successful, we're confirming that back to the caller, asking if they want buggy hire or help with anything else. And if there's nothing else, we're politely ending the call. Now, of course, this is only really representing the happy path of how the call goes if everything goes smoothly. We've not built a lot of edge cases around it because this is just a demo, but hopefully gives you a nice example of how you might build a voice agent in Retell AI. Now, if you're still wondering whether or not to use Retell AI for your voice agents, I'd recommend watching this video next, where I ran a ton of tests on their platform and compared them head to head against Vapi and Simflow. See you there.